You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans! Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and there's a lot to get to today. A couple of college basketball stories to break down. Also going to do a little This Day in Sports History and give you another correct Mount Rushmore. But I got to start with a trending NBA story. And this has nothing to do with any crazy trade rumors or anything like that. This has to do with a couple sickening videos that were making the rounds yesterday, and they both concern Delonte West. For those of you who may not remember West, he was a pretty good NBA player. He was good for about 10 or 11 points a night, and, you know, he played okay defense. It's irrelevant. What matters is the content of the video. And just to put it in context a little bit, according to Basketball Reference, he's made over $16.2 million playing basketball. At least just in the NBA. He also spent some time overseas. He is now homeless. And he looks unrecognizable. If I passed him on the street, the only way I'd be able to recognize him would be by his tattoos. Well, okay, you know, that's a sad story, but why are we talking about it now? Well, the videos, the first one featured him getting beaten to a pulp in the middle of the road. I don't know what the cause was. It doesn't really matter. There's no excuse to assault the homeless. And number two is a video of him talking about the attack, and I couldn't understand a word he said. He sounded unrecognizable. I don't want to say he was speaking gibberish, but he just wasn't making any sense with what he was saying. This should make you sick to your stomach. And this really has nothing to do with sports. The only reason that I'm talking about it on a sports talk show is because he happened to play in the NBA. But it's irrelevant that he played in the NBA. What matters is that this guy needs help, and he hasn't gotten it. And it's honestly kind of sickening if you think about it. The NBA really tries to talk up its mental health advocacy. Kevin Love and DeMar DeRozan have been very outspoken about it. But when one of their own is living on the streets and he's spiraling into craziness, no one does anything. I don't think anyone even knew Delonte West was homeless. I don't know if anyone, ever checked up on him. I know that he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. He has previously said that he doesn't believe that diagnosis. He just believes that he's depressed. I'm not going to speculate on his mental health conditions. The only thing I can say is that this guy clearly, and I mean clearly, needed help for a long time, and he didn't get it. This speaks to a bigger issue that we have regarding mental health in this country. I don't want to go on a political rant. This really isn't the place for it. You don't listen to this show for my political opinions. You listen to it for my sports opinions. But the only things I'll say on the matter is that I've seen Joker 3 times. And I think it's one of the greatest movies ever made. I think it's a masterpiece. I think it should be in the National Film Registry. And I think everyone should see it. There are 2 lines in that movie that may be considered throwaway lines, but they're true. The first one, the Joker never speaks. He just wrote it down in his joke diary. And it's the worst part about having a mental illness is that people expect you to behave as if you don't. And the second one is, if it was me dying in the middle of the street, you wouldn't care. And just to give you some context of who Joker is in this movie, he's a rent-a-clown who's trying to just scrape by. I don't want to spoil too much if you haven't seen it. The 2 things that he said couldn't be more true. It's clear that West has mental health issues. And that's okay. It's perfectly fine to have mental health issues. There's a stigma in this country that it depicts weakness. And I personally think the only weakness is not getting the help you need if you know you need it. Now, there are some people that think that what they're doing is okay and they don't want help. Well, then it's up to their support system, whether it's friends or family or both, to make them get help. And it's clear that West didn't have that. And the second one, if it was just a normal Joe Schmo who was getting beaten to a bloody pulp and was rambling on afterwards, yeah, we wouldn't care about it. It wouldn't be trending. The only reason that we're talking about it is because it's Delonte West. It should make everyone sick to their stomach that his situation got to this point. There's no one who can be blamed specifically. It's a combination of everyone who was around him, who knew that he needed help, and he didn't get it. We all knew that he had issues. It's no secret that he had issues. He talked about it openly. But evidently no one cared. Evidently no one listened. I don't know what mental health benefits NBA players get with the union. I don't know what services the league provides. But both parties should be ashamed of themselves for not getting this guy help. And if it turns out that there were people who were trying to get him help, and he just wasn't using it, okay, that's a different issue. But the stories that I've seen are his former teammates saying that we had no idea that this was how he was living. And, you know, again, no one is to blame specifically. At the end of the day, if you're a former teammate of West's, it's not your job to check up on him. he's a grown man, and he does need to be held responsible for his own actions. But it's clear that he needed help, and he didn't get it. That's the issue here. He needed help, whether it's psychological counseling or just living in a homeless shelter, something, anything. He needed help, and he didn't get it. And we saw the result of it. Now, thankfully, there's been a huge outcry of support for him. A bunch of his former teammates are speaking out saying, we've got to get this guy help. I know that Phil Martelli, his former coach at St. Joseph's, is trying to get him help. I know that there are some GoFundMes that have been set up for him. I don't know which one is legit. I don't know which ones aren't. So I can't say donate to this one specifically. All I can say is this is a heartbreaking situation. It should make everyone sick to their stomach. It shouldn't matter that this guy was a former NBA player. The issue is that this guy needed help, and he didn't get it. And you saw what comes from that. Here's hoping that the people speaking out against it aren't just being slacktivists, and they're actually gonna try to make a difference in this guy's life. It's not too late for him to turn his life around. He's only 36 years old. There's no reason why he can't clean himself up and begin a second career doing something else. He just needs to have the right people in his corner, and he needs to get help when he needs it. There's nothing wrong in needing help. The issue is not getting the help when you need it. Not seeking out the help. And this is not victim blaming by any stretch. It's clear that West didn't know that he could get help. No one lives like that by choice. But there should have been people around him getting him that help. And it's a shame that it took those two videos to show that this needs to be overhauled. Hopefully this serves as a cautionary tale and no one else has to go through this, but we all know it won't. And that's the worst part. Moving over to college basketball now, and the first story that I want to talk about is Baylor narrowly avoiding getting majorly upset by Oklahoma. Firstly, let me just say that I don't know too much about Oklahoma this year. I haven't watched them, so I really can't focus on them. I'm going to focus on Baylor here, and this is a win that should make you very, very happy if you're a Baylor fan. Not in that they narrowly beat a, let's face it, average Oklahoma team, but how they beat that Oklahoma team. They should have blown them out. There's no excuse for not blowing them out. But their best player this year is Jared Butler. Puts up 16 points a night, 3 rebounds, and 3 assists. But in this game, he only shot 2 for 13 from the field and 0 for 6 from 3. Usually, when your best player is off in college, your supporting cast is not good enough to pick up the slack. Well, Baylor's supporting cast was good enough. Masio Teague put up 16. Freddie Gillespie, double-double. Davion Mitchell, 13 points. Baylor played really good defense. So did Oklahoma, but Baylor really stepped up defensively. This is a game that should make you very happy if you're a Bears fan. It shows that when your best player is off, you can still win. And look, you may not be able to do that against teams like Gonzaga and Kansas and maybe San Diego State. But this is a win that should give you confidence. It should give the team confidence. It should give Scott Drew confidence. Drew's a great coach. It shows that they don't need Jared Butler to win. They can rely on their supporting cast. And that makes them a very, very scary team in March. Moving over now to Butler versus Villanova. And I'll start with Butler. Not much has changed from the last time I talked about him. They're still centered around Kmar Baldwin and Sean McDermott. Two very good players. And they take pride in their defense. Whenever you go up against a team like that in March, they're going to give you issues. I remember VCU in, I think it was 2011, the Havoc defense. It stifled teams. That's how the mid-majors win. They usually play great defense. I'm not saying that Butler's a mid-major, but you can win in March with just a good offense but a great defense. It's been done many, many times before. Just look at Texas Tech from last year. Bryce Nazeeh and Aaron Thompson are two of the most underrated defenders in the nation. But when you look at Villanova, this is one of Jay Wright's best coaching jobs. They really don't have a superstar on the team. All due respect to Sadiq Bey and Colin Gillespie. They're very, very good players, but they're not great. What they are is incredibly well-rounded. They have 5 players that are averaging at least 10.5 points a night. And early on, if you followed Villanova, all 5 of them were starting. Justin Moore was starting for them. But then they started out the season 4-2. And Wright made a change. He put Moore on the bench for Cole Swider. And that move has paid off incredibly well. Moore is a fantastic weapon to have off the bench. He's instant offense. He's a great slasher. This is a great Villanova offense. It's a team that doesn't play great defense. They're good defensively. They're not great defensively. How they win games is through their offense. And when you've got 5 players clicking, like Villanova does, that makes you a very, very scary team in March. It's at Villanova. It wouldn't surprise me if Butler won, since Butler has such a great defense, but I think Villanova's offense is going to be too much for him. I'm picking Jay Wright's team. Alright, it's time for another edition of This Day in Sports History. On this day, 27 years ago, Charlie Gehringer passed away at the age of 89. Gehringer has been lost to history a little bit, and obviously part of that is because the prime of his career was in the 1930s, and there aren't too many people around who can say that they saw him play. But, this is a guy who, without question, and I mean without question, is one of the greatest second basemen of all time. Tomorrow we're going to be doing a lot of Hall of Faming for baseball. It looks like Larry Walker is going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. I don't think Larry Walker is a Hall of Famer. I know there are a lot of people that do. Gehringer being in the Hall of Fame is indisputable. He has an MVP, he has bold type, and he has over 2,800 hits, along with a World Series. If the Hall of Fame ever decides to take players out, which I know it won't, but it's an interesting exercise if they do, Gehringer's plaque is very, very secure. He started out as a small ball hitter. Ty Cobb was his first manager, and they were very small ball oriented. Now, granted, not a lot of teams were built on power, but they were small ball centric even for their day. Charlie Gehringer had 27 sacrifice hits in 1926. Can you imagine a player with the talent of Gehringer doing that now? That's the equivalent of a guy like Aaron Judge having 27 sacrifice hits. You're never going to see that again with a player of his caliber. Then when Cobb left, he was replaced by George Moriarty. I don't know if there's a relationship between him and the Sherlock Holmes villain, but those Tigers teams of the late 20s, they had Gehringer, they had Harry Heilman, Bob Fothergill, Heine Manouche, Lou Blue. Very, very good hitters. I mean, really, some of the best hitters of their era. The thing about Gehringer is he always played with great teammates. Now, I'm not saying in terms of attitude, I'm saying in terms of their play on the field. After those guys left, he had Hank Greenberg and Goose Goslin. And it paid off in 1935 when he won his only World Series when his team beat the Cubs in 6 games. In 1937, he won his MVP. And I'll read you some of his stats. He only hit 14 home runs and he had 96 RBIs. The 14 home runs aren't impressive, but the 96 RBIs are good. Probably not MVP numbers, but 96 RBIs is good. His batting average was .371. .371! I don't care what era you're playing in. That's impressive. Especially when you combine it with a .458 on-base percentage and a .520 slugging percentage. The guy was without question one of the best hitters in the 1930s. And he's still one of the best second basemen in MLB history. He was a very humble man. He was a very unassuming man. You wouldn't know that he was a baseball player if you passed him down the street. When he retired, he did come back to be GM of the Tigers for a little bit, but after that, he went into selling fabric to automobile companies. Can you imagine a guy who was as dominant as Gehringer doing that now, retiring to sell fabric? They don't make him like Gehringer anymore, man. Let me tell you. May he rest in peace. Alright, it's time for another Mount Rushmore. I did the Yankees for my first one, so I'll keep the theme of favorite teams alive. I'll move over to the New York Islanders. And this one was pretty easy to narrow down. It had to be one of the 6 guys with their numbers currently retired. Now, Nystrom and Gillies, all due respect to them, Clark Gillies was at my bar mitzvah. He's an incredibly nice man. But, with all due respect to him, he wasn't as dominant as some of those other guys. Great player, should definitely be in the Hall of Fame, but just not as dominant. He was the enforcer for that team. And he could score too, but when you look at a Mount Rushmore, it should be for offensive play more than physicality. Bob Nystrom, another really nice guy. I've met him. He just didn't have the career as some of those other guys. Again, really good player, but I don't think he's worthy of a spot on the Islanders' Mount Rushmore. The correct order is Mike Bossy, Brian Trottier, Dennis Potvin, and Billy Smith. Mike Bossy is one of the greatest goal scorers in NHL history. Brian Trottier has the most points in Islanders history. Dennis Potvin was the captain of those 4 Stanley Cup winning teams and was by far and away one of the best defensemen of his era. You can make the argument he was the second best one behind just Bobby Orr. And Billy Smith was the goalie for those teams. You can't leave the goalie out. This one wasn't as hard as the Yankees Mount Rushmore. Then again, the Yankees Mount Rushmore really wasn't hard. It was pretty easy to put this together. The only thing you can kind of sort of make an argument on is the final spot. Do you want to put Gillies there? Do you want to put a guy like LaFontaine there? But for my money, Billy Smith was more dominant than them, so I'll put him in the final spot. Tomorrow there's a lot to do. I'm going to be Hall of Faming, breaking down who was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame, and telling you what my ballot would have been. I did post this on Twitter, but if you didn't see it, I'll break it down for you on this show. I'll also tell you what you can expect from Zion Williamson in his debut game against the Spurs. He will start tomorrow. I will be watching. Should be a lot of fun. And we'll see what other stories there are to break down. Until tomorrow, I am Jacob Valk saying that the Phenoms aren't phenomenating.